Life is short is bullshit. Life is actually really long. Just ask my 14-year-old daughter. A summer for her is like an eternity. I think we forget that as we get older because our lives get filled with so many more to-dos. Every day ends up being so similar, it starts all blur together. And maybe that's why so many people want to be their own boss. Maybe they're looking for a little adventure, something to break the blur of sameness. And that's why Jan Morris is one of my favorite clients of all time. Jan's adventure started at her kitchen table when she opened a letter from the state of Washington. And she was expecting this notice that her unemployment application had been approved. And instead, she got a letter that said she had been accepted into Washington State's self-employment assistance program because the state believed, and get this, she was unemployable. Jan was 60 years old at that time. She had spent the prior 25 years as an attorney before being laid off during the Great Recession. And now the state of Washington was telling her there was nothing out there for her unless she created it. And so she did. She opened a distillery. Jan had never distilled anything in her life before then. She took a 1-week course in Eastern Washington and just figured out the rest as she went. Her sister actually had to write out a list of questions for her to ask customers because she had no idea how to do retail. And yet Jan bet her future on her own reinvention after her 60th birthday. She and her husband used 401k funds to buy this building in a tiny town called Hoodsport on the Olympic Peninsula. And that's where she opened her distillery. And in this town, no stoplights, just 5 buildings on the side of a highway. That was more than 13 years ago. And today, their aquavit liquor, which they make out of Washington State pears, is on the menu at Canlis, which in my opinion is the best fine dining restaurant in Seattle. And now they own a second building down the road that houses a brewery, a tasting room, and an art gallery where Jan teaches watercolor courses a couple times a week. Jan even started a small festival built on this unusual Norwegian distilling tradition. So here's the story. Back in 1806, there was this shipment of aquavit liquor that was sent across the equator and ended up getting rejected. So the barrels actually got returned back across the Atlantic Ocean. And the ship's motion, combined with the crossing of the equator, it somehow transformed this liquor into something that people thought was really remarkable. And so the tradition stuck. Today, there's actually a company called Linje that still makes an aquavit that they literally cross the equator in a ship on a 4-month journey before it's actually sold. So Jan thought, why not recreate this on the Hood Canal? So how does she do it? Well, each year her husband, Chuck, rolls a barrel out to the middle of the canal and back. And now this festival regularly draws hundreds of boaters. And speaking of Chuck, Jan told me that until they opened their distillery, she had always assumed Chuck was the quiet one. And then they opened the tasting room. And now, according to her, he has a running collection of bad jokes he tells every single customer. Chuck gets up in the morning excited to go to work. What I found fascinating about this is after 43 years of marriage, and Jan hadn't seen that side of him. And Jan, now in her mid-70s, doesn't have any plans to retire. She actually says the only thing she regrets is not starting a business sooner. I think about Jan anytime someone tells me they probably waited too long. I mean, Jan didn't even start till she was 60. She's in her mid-70s now and still going, and the only thing she wishes she'd done differently is start sooner. So the reality is, you and I probably have more time than we think. Don't quit your daydream. I'll see y'all next week. Cheers.